Before zombies, vampires that sparkle in the sun, or superheroes born from gamma rays, there was Frankenstein. But the real story isn't just about a monster stitched from corpses. It's about the teenage girl who imagined him on a stormy night and created one of the most powerful cautionary tales ever written. In 1815, the eruption of Mount Tambora plunged part of the world into darkness. The phenomenon became known as the year without a summer. It was in this strange, gloomy atmosphere that in 1816, Mary Godwin, the future Mary Shelley, traveled with the poet Percy Shelley and her half-sister Claire Clement to join Lord Byron on the shores of Lake Geneva. Trapped indoors for days of relentless storms, Byron proposed a challenge. Each should write a ghost story. And it was then, at just 18 years old, that Mary began to imagine one of the most influential narratives in literature. Mary Shelley, child of revolution, child of sorrow. Mary was born in 1797, the daughter of philosopher William Godwin and pioneering feminist Mary Wollstonecraft, who died just days after her birth. Her mother's absence deeply marked her life, and her troubled relationship with her stepmother, Mary Jane Clement, added layers of tension and loneliness to Mary's youth. At 16, she met the poet Percy Bysshe Shelley, and their romance was both intense and tumultuous. In 1814, they fled England together, accompanied by Claire, causing scandal. Percy was already married and a father, Mary was pregnant, and society harshly condemned such defiance. Life with Percy was a mix of revolutionary ideas, free love, betrayals, and constant clashes with social norms, but also devastating losses. Mary endured the death of 3 young children, with only Percy Florence surviving. This experience of grief and motherhood echoes throughout Frankenstein, where creation and loss are deeply intertwined. When ambition meets humanity. During those stormy days in Geneva, Mary envisioned a scientist defying life and death by reanimating lifeless matter. From that image was born Frankenstein, a work that blends horror, romanticism, and ethical inquiry. The subtitle, The Modern Prometheus, is more than just a literary reference. Just like the Titan who stole fire from the gods, Victor Frankenstein dares to trespass forbidden limits, and pays dearly for it. Shelley crafts an early warning about the consequences of unchecked scientific ambition and the attempt to control forces we do not fully understand. The novel was born in the heart of Romanticism, celebrating emotion, imagination, and nature, but also offering subtle critiques of society and reckless progress. Mary questioned the impact of science, the creator's responsibility toward their creation, and the limits of human knowledge, themes that still resonate in modern science fiction. It is precisely for this bold union of science, philosophy, and imagination that she is considered by many to be one of the very first, if not the first, science fiction writers. Sorrow, resilience, and literary immortality. Mary's life was not only one of inspiration, but of unending hardship. In 1822, she suffered a nearly fatal miscarriage, and soon after, Percy Shelley drowned at the age of 29, leaving Mary a widow at only 24. Even so, she devoted herself to their surviving son and to preserving her husband's literary legacy. Mary kept writing, exploring catastrophes and social reflection in works like The Last Man, though none reached the impact of Frankenstein. That novel became a cornerstone of Gothic literature, philosophy, and science fiction, enduring through generations as a mirror of human complexity. 1818 or 1831, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. For many, the first edition of 1818 reveals the most radical and original vision of the author. In 1831, however, Mary revised the book, softening certain elements, such as Elizabeth's role, who shifts from Victor's cousin to an adopted orphan. This edition also expands on Victor's fascination with electricity and galvanism, and includes implicit reflections on Mary's own life choices. Critics often argue that the 1818 edition reflects Shelley's truest intent, while the 1831 version engages more with a conservative readership, ensuring the story's survival and relevance in different contexts. The first edition of 1818 was published anonymously, without Mary's name. At the time, it was unusual, even frowned upon, for women to sign works of horror or philosophical reflection. Mary was only 20 years old and already surrounded by personal scandals. Her elopement with Percy and the harsh social disapproval weighed heavily. The preface, written by Percy Shelley, even led many readers to believe he was the author. It was only in 1823, with the second edition, that Mary's name finally appeared, revealing to the public that the revolutionary mind behind the story was that of a young woman. More than a monster, lessons on humanity. For centuries, Critics have debated Frankenstein not only as a horror story, but as a narrative deeply tied to gender questions. Mary Shelley presents female characters capable of logical reasoning, eloquence, and resilience in a world of restrictions. Elizabeth and Justine, for instance, challenge the idea that women lacked critical thought or agency. The novel also highlights women's emotional labor, the expectation to manage the feelings of others at the expense of their own well-being, showing how such roles both defined and constrained women's lives in the 19th century. But the layers of meaning don't end there. Scholars point out that the novel also engages with debates on slavery and abolition. The creature, created and then abandoned by Victor, suffers rejection and violence simply for existing outside his creator's expectations. Shelley delivers an implicit critique of exploitation and inequality, even if through subtle metaphor. More contemporary readings broaden this lens. The creature's rejection for his appearance reflects issues of prejudice and identity. Victor's parental neglect illustrates how absence and lack of care can cause deep trauma, echoing debates on responsibility and empathy. It is this richness of interpretation that reveals Shelley's genius. Frankenstein is not merely about horror and science. It is a mirror where each generation finds reflections on gender, freedom, inequality, and exclusion, making the novel timeless. From book to screen, how Frankenstein became an icon. When we think of Frankenstein, we imagine the mad scientist, the green monster with bolts in his neck and villages in flames. But almost none of this exists in the book. The 1931 film starring Boris Karloff created the image that would dominate pop culture. A simplified plot, changes to the creature's appearance, the removal of his eloquent voice, and a tragic ending. Even so, it defined the monster for entire generations. Since then, the creature has spread across cinema, theater, comics, and games, becoming a true horror icon. From ghost story challenges by a lake to shaping the birth of science fiction, Mary Shelley left us much more than Frankenstein. She left us questions about science, responsibility, prejudice, and what it truly means to be human. Her creature may have vanished into the frozen night, but her words keep haunting us 2 centuries later. And that's the mark of true genius. What do you think? Was Mary Shelley simply ahead of her time, or are we still catching up with her ideas? Tell me in the comments. Do you like content like this? Leave a like to let me know. And don't forget to follow Literary Sound on Spotify, YouTube, and TikTok. Because here, every book is an echo that never dies.